Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello, and how are you? Welcome back. I know it's been a bit of a hiatus since I recorded my last episode, and while I have been away, I have not forgotten you all. And I definitely have a great couple of shows coming up, and I feel like I always say that, but I have some really nice shows in store for you guys. But however, let's dive into today's topic, which is going to be no contact, low contact, and gray rock method, and when, where, and how, and why we use these things. So I am still working in private practice, have been for some years, and I still get folks that come to me, and see me in my practice that have questions about what no contact is. And a lot of times people misuse or misunderstand no contact as being low contact, which is where you would speak to someone sparingly. But it's not the same, and I want to definitely break it down to you, the differences between these things and why we would use them. So when you're in a relationship with a narcissist and you've been on this emotional roller coaster for however long you've been on, there will come a point in time when you've decided that you have had enough. If you're in a position to completely be done with that person, meaning that you don't rely on them. Your life is going to drastically improve without them. I always encourage people to, consider no contact. Like if these people have turned your life upside down with chaos and conflict, or have been very destructive in terms of ruining your self-esteem or sabotaging you in some way, physically, sexually, financially, whatever the case may be, if it's doing more harm than not, I always encourage low contact. And I understand that not everybody's in a place to do that. So, it's not a one size fits all. Some people are married to a person. There may be safety factors at play, or risk factors at play that kind of, keep a person tied to a narcissist. So, for example, while it may be emotionally easier to have that person gone, if the person is feeling retaliatory, they want to be disruptive to your peace and to your life and to the possibility of you moving on and being in a better space. And so they're going to make it their mission to be very destructive towards you. And violent. And so maybe a person doesn't have the ability to go no contact, is what I'm trying to say. So, and it's important for me to point out what no contact is. No contact with a narcissist is exactly what it sounds like. It means that for me, it means that you have ceased all contact with the narcissist. You have ceased all desire to want to communicate and to I also think that you've seized all efforts to kind of check up on a person or see how they're doing. So that means that you're not riding by their house. You are not, checking their social media. You're not communicating through third parties, seeing who they're seeing or what they're doing, or what their new person is like, or that kind of stuff, or communicating with family. So you're not doing these backdoor communication and contact efforts either. Once you go no contact, it is specifically designed for you to put yourself, your emotional needs first, and be in the right headspace that you've moved on from this relationship. You are also have no intention of going back to this relationship. And I want to be clear about that, because there is also too a misperception that, oh, if I go no contact and I play this game, then this person will, um, they'll come back to me. So really it's more of me trying to manipulate a narcissistic person or a toxic person, and they're going to come back to me. And that's what I secretly desire, because I'm not ready to move on, even though that's what I'm telling people. I'm really emotionally not ready to move on. And I really secretly desire for this person to come back into my life. I think no contact is reserved for when you're at the point of no return, you have no desire for that person to come back. You have no desire to be any sort of communication, any type of relationship with that person at all, and you are done. And you're ready to put 1,000% of your efforts in focusing on healing and moving on with your life and getting past this relationship. And so, I think, and you could do that with family, you could do that with, work, you could do that with whatever you want to do it with, once you've decided that you want to move on. But you need to be, before you push that button, those block and delete and those permanent buttons, you need to be sure about what you're doing, and, choose wisely with that. If you're going to sort of yo-yo back and forth, um, then no contact for you, it almost becomes like it's not even like something that's worthwhile, because no one is going to take that boundary that you set seriously. They're not going to take you seriously, because they know once you kind of keep cross stepping over the line, then it's like, oh, this person can't really keep a boundary. So all I know is that I have to do this or say this, and this person is going to unblock me or want to communicate and la la la. And so the both of you guys, if you can't maintain that no contact, once you've decided that, then both of you are toxic, not just one of you. And I think that's an important distinction as well. And you should most likely seek the advice of a professional, a therapist, to kind of help with that, because sometimes we do struggle with boundaries. We do miss people. We do long for connection. We get lonely. We have all of these feelings, and we're just very tempted to do that. But that means that you can't A, keep a boundary to yourself, and B, you can't keep a boundary with other people. So most likely you will need some more guidance and assistance with that beyond what this podcast is advising, right? So, in an ideal situation, once you go no contact, you will change your number. Some people even move or relocate if they have that, if they're able to do that. But, you know, um, if your worst case scenario, you want to block and delete and make sure that person doesn't have access to you through social media channels, or, through your phone or whatever. But, you can always take it the extra step in sort of changing your number, which I would advise you to do if you have that luxury. Not everyone has that. Like if it's a business phone or a work number or things like that, you don't necessarily have that luxury. But there are other avenues there in terms of, um, making sure that you cease contact. Now, there are people that, everyone has different reasons, everyone has a different situation. There are some people that want to maintain low contact. So, for example, if you have elderly parents, right, that are narcissistic, or an ailing parent, or, this might be your child's parent, or something like that. So you can't unfortunately walk away, or you feel like, you would feel too guilty or too burdened, emotionally burdened, to walk away from maybe like a sick or ailing parent, because, a lot of people decide that, hey, my parent is at this stage of life. I have decided that I understand who they are. And I understand that they're never going to change. And so I have decided that I will put up with a certain amount of stuff because emotionally I just can't part with them knowing that they're going to be gone soon or whatever the case may be. So everyone has different reasons, and so you decide that you want to go low contact. And low contact is essentially exactly how it sounds, where you're dialing back the communication, and you are communicating on an as needed basis very sparingly. So you're not communicating once a day. You're not, and unless, there's something medically going on or whatever, but you're not really communicating frequently. You're just dialing it back for emergencies, special occasions, and things like that. But those conversations are very brief. Those conversations are very boundaried. So they're not conversations and where you're allowing that person to sort of steamroll you and engage you in this back and forth where you guys are fighting or verbally sparring for hours on end. It's not that. It's that you're very clear about who this person is and you're acting accordingly and sort of keeping that relationship on a very tight leash. And so those would be the parameters. So for example, if your child's mother or father is a narcissist and you know that you have to communicate with them for some things, you can communicate with them, and you might, depending on whatever your custody arrangements are and divorce decrees and, all that kind of good stuff, you may not want to necessarily give them your number, or you may not want to, your direct number, but maybe you might want to communicate with them through, the parenting apps. So there's a lot of people that communicate through parenting apps. And so those parenting apps are apps where, the dialogue is that's stored. And so if anything ever gets out of order on a parenting app, then, you can take that to the courts or what have you. So a good example of a parenting app would be something like Our Family Wizard or something similar to that. But again, check with the requirements per your attorney or per the courts, or, if you have things in place like court orders. But the idea is that you want to keep some distance between them. And then if they do have a phone, maybe it can be something like an alternative phone where they don't have access to, your direct address or things like that. So it might be through a phone app or something like that. Again, pending those, the orders from court or whatever you guys have worked in place. But it shouldn't be something where they can call you late at night and see who you're with. And, one Friday they're feeling lonely and, we can hook up or things like that. So it should be something where you're kind of keeping things to a minimal. You are in agreement, or you have an understanding, or you have a boundary that we're only going to communicate about the necessary things, like your child has a doctor's appointment, your child was sick at school today and needs to be picked up. Can you go pick them up? It's not it shouldn't be for, extensive arguing and back and forth and things like that. So that's where you want to keep that boundary. And you want to be clear about that. And I also emphasize that if you are doing low contact, you also should probably be meeting with a therapist to make sure that you are doing the work around, that you are still doing the emotional labor and work around, emotional labor for yourself around that kind of stuff. Because even though it's low contact and it's minimal, you're still interacting with a person that's abusive, and most contacts, even through low contacts, aren't pleasant. You can almost always, even through that small amount of contact, the conversation's going to turn the dynamic, or that person's demeanor towards you is going to be condescending, and so that still has an impact on you. So you are still you are still most likely being triggered or you still may be experiencing abuse. So you want to still be meeting with someone on a consistent basis to talk about how you're doing emotionally and how you're dealing with that, and how how you handle things if a person tries to step outside of a boundary. Um, as well as making sure that you're keeping your expectations realistic. You're not sort of, you don't have any sort of false hope or things like that. Because sometimes, even with low contact, people can start getting this sort of sense of false hope that maybe that abusive person can change and maybe we could possibly explore being friends again or what have you. So, that's why I'm putting that out there. If that applies to you, but if it doesn't, great. And lastly, we want to talk about gray rock. Gray rock is something I almost feel like most people who are victims of narcissistic abuse automatically do, if that makes sense. But it's essentially just how it sounds. When you are in a relationship with a narcissist and you want to use a gray rock method, you make yourself as uninteresting as a gray rock. And so that means that if you're in this relationship with, your husband, wife, your job or whatever, you essentially want to make yourself as uninteresting as possible. So that means when that person is condescending or yelling or really trying to goad you into something, that you're not responding, you're not giving it any attention, you're not making eye contact with that person, you're just being uninterested and really uninvolved as possible with arguing or engaging with a high conflict person that really wants to get you started up in something. I think there does need to be some therapy around this if you're using it, if you know that this is what you're doing, because a lot of people misuse, I think, gray rock as a method to stay in a relationship. In other words, I'm going to hang in there because, again, there's this false hope that things would work out, things may get better, as opposed to, I'm going to hang in there, I'm surviving, but I know in 30 days I'll be out of here, so they may not know that, but my plan that I've already put in place and really thought this out is that I'm going to be out of here. So with gray rock, I really do think that there needs to be a timeline around it. Now, if you're a child, and you're growing up in a parent's household that's abusive, which I don't think many children listen to this podcast, but if it's a child or a teenager that can't necessarily leave, again, that's usually most kids that grow up with abusive parents, whether they say it out loud or not, they typically have a timeline in their head. Like as soon as I turn, whatever age, I'm out of here, or as soon as I can get, because without even realizing it, they're usually thinking about an escape plan to get out of their parents' home. So even with that being said, most people who usually do that are already ready to go in their minds, even if they don't say it out loud. So again, gray rock should have a specific goal and a timeline to be effective. Otherwise, you are just a person that is in an abusive relationship, that is enduring abuse, regardless of how you respond. And so it becomes ineffective in the long run. So if you are just using it to sustain or stay in a relationship, I think it can become ineffective, and even more damaging because you're still enduring abuse. And whether we like it or not, abusive environments have an impact on our psyche. It has an impact on our brain development, how we're wired, our internal dialogue, and how we speak to ourselves. It has an impact on how we show up in the world, the relationships that we establish, and just the overall way that we navigate through life. And so I hope that the way that I'm explaining that is clear to you guys. And so, everyone is in their own different place with dealing with narcissistic abuse. So these are some of the tactics that people use. I will say, without a doubt, though, the most effective method is always no contact. So the sooner you can get to a place where you can shut it down and you don't have any more contact with that narcissist in your life and you can move on, that is going to have the best possible results for you to heal, move on, and start new. All right, so I hope that helps. And until next time, you guys take care of yourselves and be well.